At a desolate gas station on the edge of the Arizona desert, a group of leather-clad bikers roared into the parking lot, their laughter and revving engines echoing into the night. At first, they ignored the lone man filling up his battered truck, mistaking his quiet demeanor for weakness. But when one of them shoved him, they saw something in his eyes: cold, unflinching resolve. What they didn't know was that this man wasn't just any traveler. He was a soldier, trained for war and ready to finish a fight.
The Arizona sun had long dipped below the horizon, leaving the desert cloaked in darkness. The gas station stood alone on the desolate highway, its flickering fluorescent lights weakly cutting through the vast emptiness. Noah Reed leaned against his old Chevy truck, the steady hum of the pump the only sound in the stillness. His weathered face and calm demeanor belied a life filled with battles. Battles he preferred not to talk about. Tonight he was simply passing through. The sound of roaring engines shattered the quiet. A gang of bikers, their leather jackets emblazoned with a vulture insignia, rumbled into the gas station, their laughter harsh and grating. Their arrival was like a thunderstorm, tearing into the calm. Noah glanced up briefly, then returned his attention to the pump. He had no interest in trouble, and he hoped they felt the same. But deep down, his instincts told him otherwise. Trouble always seemed to find him. Inside the gas station, the clerk, a wiry young man with glasses, visibly tensed as the bikers poured in. They were loud, boisterous, and disrespectful. One of them knocked over a rack of chips, laughing as the bags scattered across the floor. Another grabbed a drink from the cooler and popped it open without sparing a glance at the clerk. "Hey, you gonna pay for that?" the clerk asked, his voice trembling despite his attempt to sound authoritative. The leader of the gang, a burly man with a shaved head and a long scar running down his cheek, turned slowly toward the clerk, his grin menacing. "What are you gonna do about it, kid?" Noah heard the exchange, but kept his eyes on the pump. He didn't want to get involved. Not yet. He watched the bikers move like a pack of wolves, reveling in their dominance. A family in an SUV quickly pulled away, the father glancing nervously at the gang. A young couple at another pump abandoned their half-filled tank and sped off into the night. The gas station, once a safe pit stop, had turned into a playground for chaos. Noah replaced the pump nozzle, his truck's tank full. He was about to climb into his truck when one of the bikers, a towering brute named Grizz, noticed him. Grizz's predatory gaze landed on Noah's truck, and he nudged one of his companions, smirking. "Hey, old man," Grizz called out, his voice dripping with mockery. "Nice truck, classic. How about you let me take it for a spin?" Noah turned slowly, his expression calm, but his eyes sharp. "Not interested," he said evenly, his tone firm but not aggressive. The gang roared with laughter, their voices echoing through the desert night like a pack of hyenas. Grizz took a step closer, his shadow falling over Noah. "That's not how this works, old man. You give me the keys, and I decide if you get them back." Noah didn't respond. He simply stared at Grizz, his posture relaxed but his muscles coiled like a spring. The silence unnerved the biker, though he wouldn't admit it. Grizz reached out, shoving Noah's shoulder. It was a mistake. Noah moved like lightning, grabbing Grizz's wrist and twisting it. The biker yelped in pain, dropping to one knee. The rest of the gang surged forward, but Noah let Grizz go and stepped back. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Walk away," Noah said, his voice calm but firm, as though giving them a chance to rethink their actions. The gang hesitated. They weren't used to being challenged, especially not by a lone man. But the leader, Scar, wasn't about to let this slide. He stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of a knife strapped to his belt. "You've got guts, old man," Scar said, his voice dripping with venom. "I'll give you that. But guts don't mean much when you're outnumbered." Noah sighed. He didn't want this fight, but he wasn't about to back down. As the bikers closed in, he calculated his next move. He wasn't just any man. He was a soldier, trained to handle situations far worse than this. He adjusted his stance slightly, readying himself for what was about to come. Scar signaled, and the bikers charged. Noah moved with precision, his fists striking like hammers. He dodged and countered, using their momentum against them. Grizz tried to grab him from behind, but Noah elbowed him in the gut, sending him sprawling. Scar drew his knife, but Noah disarmed him with a swift kick to the wrist, sending the blade skittering across the pavement. The fight was over in minutes. The bikers lay groaning on the ground, their bravado shattered. As Noah turned toward his truck, Scar struggled to his feet, his eyes burning with defiance. "You think this is over?" Scar growled. "We've got brothers, old man. You've made yourself an enemy tonight." Noah's gaze hardened. He leaned in close, his voice cold as steel. "If your brothers are anything like you, tell them they don't stand a chance." He climbed into his truck and drove away, the engine's rumble fading into the night. Behind him, the bikers were left to nurse their bruised egos and wounds. The gas station clerk emerged from behind the counter, his hands trembling. For him, it was a night he'd never forget. For Noah, it was just another stop on a long road, one where trouble always seemed to find him, but never managed to stop him. The bikers lay sprawled across the gas station parking lot, bruised and defeated. Scar, clutching his injured wrist, watched the fading taillights of Noah's truck vanish into the darkness. Humiliation burned deeper than his wounds. For the vultures, pride wasn't just a luxury. It was their reputation. And tonight, it had been obliterated by a single man. "Get up," Scar barked, his voice hoarse but laced with fury. Grizz groaned, pushing himself onto his elbows, his face twisted in pain. The others staggered to their feet, exchanging uneasy glances. They had never been bested like this, not by one man, and certainly not in front of witnesses. "What now, boss?" Grizz muttered, wiping blood from his mouth. Scar shot him a glare sharp enough to cut steel. "What do you think?" Scar snapped. "We don't let this slide. Nobody makes fools out of the vultures." Inside the gas station, the clerk watched from behind the counter, trembling as Scar pulled out his phone. His fingers, slick with sweat and blood, dialed a number. The venom in Scar's voice sent chills down the clerk's spine. "Yeah, it's Scar. We've got a situation. I need everyone at the rendezvous point. Bring everything. We're taking care of this tonight." The clerk ducked out of sight, silently praying the lone stranger had gone far enough to escape whatever storm was brewing. Noah drove down the deserted highway, the faint glow of his dashboard lights illuminating his face. His hands were steady on the wheel, his breathing calm. He had been through worse, far worse. But something about tonight left a bitter taste in his mouth. Maybe it was the look in Scar's eyes as he promised vengeance, or maybe it was the nagging feeling that this wasn't over. His phone buzzed in the passenger seat. He glanced at the screen. A name he hadn't seen in months lit up. Carter. A fellow soldier. A brother in arms. Noah hesitated, then picked up. Carter. Noah said, his voice steady. Long time. Too long, Carter replied, his tone light but edged with urgency. Heard you were passing through Arizona. Thought I'd give you a heads up. A heads up? Noah's brow furrowed. Words out, Carter continued. The vultures. They've got a network, Noah. You made an impression tonight. Noah's grip on the wheel tightened. They don't let things go. They're rallying their guys. And if I know them, they're coming after you. Hard. Noah sighed, the weight of the situation settling over him. He had hoped to leave his past behind, to live a quiet life. But peace was always fleeting. Thanks for the warning, Noah said finally. Don't thank me yet, Carter replied. You're gonna need more than a heads up. Stay sharp, brother. The line went dead. Noah glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights in the distance. The desert stretched out endlessly around him, a sea of shadows and secrets. Back at the gas station, Scar's reinforcements began to arrive. The roar of engines echoed through the night as bikes and trucks pulled into the lot. The vultures weren't just a gang, they were an army. And tonight, that army was mobilizing. Scar stood in the center of the chaos, barking orders as men unloaded weapons, chains, and bats from their vehicles. Grizz leaned against his bike, nursing his bruises but smiling through the pain. Revenge was coming, and it would be glorious. This guy doesn't know what he's up against, Grizz muttered, his voice low but eager. Scar didn't reply. He was too focused, his mind racing through strategies. He had underestimated Noah once, but it wouldn't happen again. This time, they would come prepared. Spread out, Scar ordered. I want eyes on every road, every highway. He won't get far. The vultures moved like a well-oiled machine, spreading out across the desert like predators on the hunt. Scar climbed onto his bike, revving the engine with a roar that echoed into the night. We'll find him, Scar growled. And when we do, he'll wish he'd never crossed us. Miles away, Noah pulled into an abandoned rest stop. The building was dark, its windows shattered, and its parking lot overgrown with weeds. It was the perfect place to regroup, to think. He stepped out of his truck, stretching his legs as he scanned the area. The desert night was quiet, but Noah knew better than to trust the stillness. He had been hunted before, by enemies far more dangerous than the vultures, and he had survived. But this was different. This wasn't a battlefield. This was personal. He leaned against his truck, his mind racing. He didn't want this fight, but he knew it was coming, and if it was coming, he would meet it head on. He reached into the cab of his truck, pulling out a duffel bag. Inside were the tools of his trade, tools he had hoped to never use again. Noah's fingers brushed against the cold steel of a pistol, the weight of it both comforting and heavy. He checked the weapon, his movements smooth and practiced. His eyes scanned the horizon, searching for the telltale glow of headlights. The hunt had begun. The vultures closed in, their network of riders and spotters narrowing the search. Scar's phone buzzed with updates as his men scoured the highways, the side roads, the rest stops. They were relentless, driven by anger and pride. Noah, meanwhile, prepared for the inevitable. He wasn't just a man on the run. He was a soldier laying a trap. And when the vultures finally found him, they would learn the hard way that some prey isn't meant to be hunted. The desert was silent as Noah crouched near his truck, his senses sharp and focused. His pistol rested in his hand, its weight steady and familiar. Fear had no place here, only precision and strategy. Tonight, the vultures would learn they had chosen the wrong man to hunt. The low growl of engines reached his ears, faint but unmistakable. Noah exhaled slowly, scanning the horizon. Headlights appeared on the far side of the rest stop, distant but growing closer. He holstered his pistol and moved to the back of his truck, pulling out a weathered duffel bag. Inside were the tools of his trade, tools he hadn't touched in years, but trusted like old allies. A combat knife, heavy rope, smoke grenades, and a compact radio. Noah worked quickly, setting his plan into motion. Each movement was deliberate, every trap designed to exploit the terrain and his pursuer's arrogance. The crumbling light pole at the entrance became the anchor for his rope trap, its purpose clear. Every detail was calculated, every step precise. Scar and his men were closing in. The vultures had spread across the desert, their scouts feeding updates to Scar's central group. One of the scouts called in, his voice crackling through the radio. "Boss, we've got a truck parked at an old rest stop off Route 23. Matches the one we're after." Scar grinned, his expression more a snarl than a smile. "Good. Stay back until we arrive. Nobody touches him until I say so." The radio went silent, and Scar revved his bike. The anger simmering in his men was palpable, their need for revenge burning hotter with every mile. Scar wasn't just hunting Noah. He was chasing redemption for the vultures. Noah crouched low as the engines grew louder. He watched as 5 bikes and 2 trucks rolled into the parking lot, headlights flooding the area. Noah stayed hidden, his hand resting lightly on his pistol. Scar dismounted, his presence commanding the group. He scanned the area with a predator's gaze. "All right, Reed," he called out, his voice cutting through the night. "We know you're here. Come out, and maybe we'll let you crawl away." Noah shifted, moving silently through the shadows toward his truck. The vultures were already in his trap. Grizz, still clutching a chain and eager for revenge, stepped forward. "What's the matter, old man? Too scared to face us?" Noah yanked the rope taut. Grizz and another biker hit the ground hard, their curses echoing as they scrambled to their feet. "There!" one shouted, pointing toward the shadows. Scar raised a hand, signaling his men to spread out. "Stay sharp," he growled. One biker approached the truck, his flashlight sweeping the area. He leaned in, and a smoke grenade clattered at his feet. Thick clouds erupted, choking the lot. Noah moved like a shadow. The biker near the truck collapsed as Noah struck with precision. Another stumbled through the smoke, tripping on the taut rope. Scar barked, "Regroup! Get to the bikes!" But Noah wasn't letting them leave. He slashed tires and cut fuel lines with practiced efficiency, ensuring no easy escape. Grizz swung his chain wildly through the smoke. "Where are you?" he roared. Noah waited until the chain swung wide, then stepped in close, driving an elbow into Grizz's gut. The biker crumpled, gasping for air. Scar charged as the smoke cleared, pulling a knife. "There you are," he snarled. Noah raised his pistol. "You've already lost," he said calmly. Scar hesitated. Noah fired, grazing Scar's leg and sending him to the ground. The remaining bikers froze, their leaders' fall shaking their confidence. The smoke cleared, revealing a battlefield. Bikes lay on their sides, tires slashed. The vultures, who were still standing, huddled near the trucks, their weapons abandoned. Scar sat on the ground, clutching his leg, glaring up at Noah with pure hatred. "You think this is over?" Scar spat, his voice trembling with rage. "You've no idea what you've started." Noah stepped closer, his pistol trained on Scar. "It's over when I say it is." He tossed zip ties at a biker. "Tie him up." The man obeyed, securing Scar's hands. Noah's gaze swept the group. "Tell the others what happened. They'll get the same if they come after me." Without another word, Noah climbed into his truck and drove off. The desert swallowed the sound of his retreat, leaving silence behind. But Noah knew it wasn't over. The vultures were like a hydra. Cut off one head, and another would rise. He glanced at his reflection in the rearview mirror, his jaw set. The fight wasn't behind him. It was only beginning. The desert air was heavy with tension as Noah drove away from the rest stop, his headlights cutting through the night. He kept his eyes on the road ahead, but his mind was on the battlefield he had left behind. The vultures might be regrouping, but they were broken for now. That wouldn't last. He knew men like Scar didn't let humiliation slide. They stewed in it, weaponized it, and came back stronger. Noah adjusted the rearview mirror, catching his own reflection. His jaw was clenched tight, his gray eyes hardened from years of war. There had been a time when he'd hoped to leave this part of himself behind, to trade combat for peace. But some fights had a way of finding him, no matter how far he ran. The truck jolted slightly as it hit a pothole, pulling Noah's focus back to the present. His fuel gauge was hovering dangerously close to empty. He sighed. Fighting off a biker gang was one thing. Surviving the desert on foot was another. He would need to refuel soon, but he had to be smart about it. The vultures might already have scouts ahead, watching the highways. He pulled over to the side of the road, killing the engine and stepping out into the cool night. The vast expanse of the desert stretched around him, silent and endless. Noah opened the back of his truck, pulling out a military-grade map. He traced a route with his finger, his eyes narrowing as he calculated the distance to the nearest small town. Back at the rest stop, Scar seethed in silence as one of his men tied a crude bandage around his leg. The bullet had only grazed him, but the pain was a constant reminder of Noah's precision. Around him, the remaining vultures worked to gather their strength, fixing bikes and siphoning gas from the trucks that Noah had sabotaged. Grizz sat nearby, rubbing his bruised ribs and glaring at Scar. "What now, boss? We just let him go?" His voice dripped with venom. Scar shot him a look that silenced him instantly. "We don't let him go. We regroup. We track him. And we end this." He stood, ignoring the sting in his leg. "No more games. Next time we bring the full crew." Another biker spoke up. "You mean the main camp? You sure? That'll take hours." Scar's eyes burned with anger. "I'm sure. Call them. Every last one of them. I want Reed outnumbered and cornered." Noah was back on the road, the engine humming steadily, as he approached the outskirts of a small, unassuming town. The neon lights of a gas station flickered in the distance, a beacon in the darkness. He slowed as he pulled into the lot, his eyes scanning for any signs of trouble. The station was quiet. A single car parked near the pumps. He stepped out cautiously, his hand never far from the pistol tucked into his waistband. The clerk inside barely glanced up from his magazine as Noah walked in, his boots echoing on the tiled floor. "Fill up on pump 3, Noah said, sliding cash across the counter. The clerk nodded lazily. "You new around here?" "Just passing through," Noah replied, his tone neutral. The clerk shrugged and went back to his reading. Noah stepped outside, the cool air brushing against his skin as he began refueling. His gaze swept over the horizon, his instincts on high alert. Every shadow felt like it could hide an enemy. He couldn't afford to be complacent. Not now. Miles away, Scar's reinforcements were arriving. A convoy of bikes and trucks roared into the rest stop, their engines echoing in the stillness of the desert night. The newcomers were grittier, meaner, and more heavily armed than the first wave. These weren't just common thugs. They were the enforcers of the vultures, men who lived for violence and thrived in chaos. Scar stood at the center of the group, his injured leg hidden beneath a leather trench coat. He addressed the crowd, his voice booming. "Reed humiliated us tonight. He took our pride and burned it. But he made one mistake. He left us alive." The men cheered, their voices blending into a primal roar. Scar raised a hand, silencing them. "We don't stop until we find him. We don't stop until he's dead. Spread out, hit the towns, he won't get far." The vultures mounted their bikes, their engines roaring as they split into smaller groups, fanning out across the desert. Scar stayed behind, his eyes narrowing as he lit a cigarette. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was personal. Noah finished refueling and climbed back into his truck, the hum of the engine a small comfort. He checked his map again, tracing a path that would take him further into the desert. The town was too exposed, too vulnerable. If the vultures found him here, it wouldn't just be his fight. It would put innocent people in danger. As he drove, his thoughts drifted to the past. He had faced worse odds before, outnumbered and outgunned in foreign lands. But this felt different. This was his home soil, and the stakes were higher. He wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting to stay free. The truck's radio crackled, breaking the silence. It was an emergency broadcast, a warning about a gang of bikers terrorizing nearby towns. Noah's grip tightened on the wheel. The vultures were already on the move. He pressed the accelerator, the truck speeding down the desolate road. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The truck sped down the desert highway, its engine growling against the silence of the night. Noah gripped the wheel tightly, his eyes scanning the horizon. The emergency broadcast confirmed what he suspected. The vultures weren't just looking for him. They were carving a path of chaos through the nearby towns, leaving destruction in their wake. Noah's thoughts raced. He could keep running, but that would only delay the inevitable. The vultures wouldn't stop, and innocent lives were at stake. He had to take the fight to them. He grabbed the compact radio from his duffel bag, flipping through frequencies. It didn't take long to find Scar. "Team 1, report." "Any sign of him?" Scar's voice crackled through the static. "Negative. We checked Route 17. Nothing." "Keep looking," Scar ordered. "When we find him, we make an example out of him." Noah tightened his grip on the wheel. They were dividing their forces. That gave him a chance to act before they regrouped. He knew the advantage of isolated targets. They were weaker, more vulnerable. He could use that. Scar sat in a black truck, his injured leg stretched out in front of him. The convoy of bikes and vehicles rumbled down a dusty back road, their headlights piercing the darkness. Scar clenched his fists, frustration simmering. "Reed thinks he's smart," Scar muttered to the driver, a burly man with tattoos snaking up his neck. "Thinks he can outmaneuver us." The driver smirked. "He's just one guy, boss. No way he can take us all." Scar didn't respond immediately. He thought back to the rest stop, to Noah's calculated precision. "He's not just some guy," Scar finally said. "He's a soldier. Soldiers don't just run. They fight when cornered." The driver glanced at him. "So you think he's setting a trap?" Scar's lips curled into a grim smile. "He doesn't have a choice, but it won't save him." Noah turned onto a dirt road, his truck kicking up dust, as it neared a rocky outcrop surrounded by boulders that cast long shadows. It was the perfect spot for an ambush, secluded and defensible. The towering rocks created narrow choke points, forcing anyone approaching to slow down. He parked the truck behind a rock formation and climbed out, grabbing his duffel bag. Moving swiftly, he began setting up traps. Smoke grenades were hidden among the rocks, ready to create confusion. A coil of heavy rope was tied across a narrow pass, positioned to trip anyone moving too fast. He placed shards of broken glass on the ground near his truck, ensuring no tires would make it out intact. His combat knife gleamed as he secured it to his belt. Noah surveyed his work, breathing steady, despite the tension building in his chest. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was about sending a message. If the vultures wanted him, they'd have to pay for it. A vulture patrol of 5 bikers and a truck approached the outcrop, their engines growling. The leader, a wiry man with a scar running down his cheek, held up a hand, signaling the group to stop. "Truck tracks," he said, pointing toward the dirt ahead. "Fresh." The others nodded, their engines rumbling low as they dismounted, weapons at the ready. The leader gestured for 2 bikers to circle around while the others followed him up the narrow pass. As they reached the rocky opening, the leader froze. Something didn't feel right. He opened his mouth to warn the others, but it was too late. The first biker tripped the rope, falling hard to the ground. A smoke grenade exploded, shrouding the area in a thick, choking cloud. Noah struck from the shadows, his movements swift and calculated. The first biker dropped to the ground with a sharp blow. The second swung wildly, but Noah sidestepped and drove his elbow into the man's ribs, sending him sprawling. His pistol flashed in his hand, its weight reassuring. "It's him!" the leader shouted, his voice muffled by the smoke. "It's Reed!" Noah moved like a phantom, taking out another biker before disappearing into the haze. The remaining men fired blindly into the smoke, their panic growing with each passing second. "Fall back," the leader yelled, but his command came too late. Noah emerged from the smoke, pistol raised. A single shot echoed, and the leader crumpled to the ground. The last biker dropped his weapon and ran. Scar's radio crackled as he sat in his truck, his patience wearing thin. "Boss, it's bad. He ambushed us. Took out the patrol." Scar's grip tightened on the radio. "Where?" "Near the rocky outcrop, east of Route 23. Scar's eyes narrowed. "Hold your position. We're coming." The convoy roared to life, speeding toward the outcrop. Scar's jaw was set, his focus on one thing: ending this once and for all. Noah stood amidst the wreckage, his breathing steady as he reloaded his pistol. The bodies of the vulture patrol lay scattered around him, their weapons abandoned in the dirt. He glanced toward the horizon. The faint glow of headlights in the distance, signaling the arrival of reinforcements. Holstering his pistol, Noah moved quickly, disappearing into the shadows of the rocky terrain. The real fight was just beginning. The glow of approaching headlights grew brighter as the vulture convoy roared toward the rocky outcrop. Scar sat at the front of the lead truck, his injured legs stretched out, gripping the dashboard tightly. He could feel the anticipation in his men as they prepared to face the man who had humiliated them, Noah Reed. "This ends tonight," Scar growled. "No more games." The driver nodded. "We'll pin him down. He can't run forever." Scar didn't respond. This wasn't about pinning Noah down. It was about annihilation. The rocky outcrop loomed ahead, jagged shadows stretching across the desert. Scar's lips curled into a grim smile. If Reed wanted a fight, he was about to get one. Noah crouched behind a boulder, his breathing steady as he surveyed the convoy approaching through the narrow pass. The headlights illuminated the terrain, casting flickering shadows. He had moved swiftly after the first ambush, setting more traps along the path. He knew the vultures would come in force, and he intended to make them pay. He tightened his grip on his pistol. The weight of it was reassuring. His mind was calm and focused, his movements deliberate. As the first truck rolled closer, Noah shifted position. It was time. The convoy slowed as it entered the outcrop, wary of the twisting path ahead. Scar leaned forward, scanning the terrain. "Keep your eyes open," he barked. "He's here somewhere." The lead truck crept forward, its tires crunching over the dirt. Then, without warning, an explosion rocked the pass. A fireball erupted beneath the truck, flipping it onto its side and blocking the path. The bikers behind skidded to a halt, engines roaring in protest. "Ambush!" one of them shouted, scrambling for cover. Chaos erupted as smoke grenades detonated, filling the narrow pass with thick clouds. The vultures fired blindly into the haze, panic setting in. Scar climbed out of the second truck, fury etched across his face. "Stay together!" he roared. "Don't let him pick you off." But it was too late. Noah moved like a shadow through the smoke, striking with precision. The first biker fell with a sharp blow to the head. The second stumbled, coughing, before Noah's pistol flashed in the darkness. Scar's men fired wildly, their bullets ricocheting off the rocks. "Where is he?" someone shouted, fear creeping into their voice. Scar growled, gripping his weapon. "Come out, Reed. Face me." Noah watched from the shadows, his expression cold and calculating. Scar wanted a confrontation on his terms, but Noah wasn't playing by his rules. He moved silently through the maze of rocks, picking off the vultures one by one. Every movement was deliberate, every shot precise. The vultures were crumbling, their confidence shattered. One by one, they fell. Scar's frustration boiled over as he realized what was happening. This wasn't a battle. It was a dismantling. Scar spotted movement through the smoke, a shadow darting between the rocks. He raised his weapon, finger tightening on the trigger. "There you are," he muttered. He fired, but when the smoke cleared, the space was empty. Scar's jaw clenched, as he realized he'd been lured into the open. A voice rang out, cutting through the chaos. "This is leadership? Hiding behind your men while they die for you?" Scar spun around, his eyes narrowing. "Show yourself, Reed. Let's finish this." From the shadows, Noah stepped forward, his pistol aimed steadily at Scar. "You've got me. Let's end this." Scar sneered. "You're dead." He fired, but Noah had already moved. The shot missed as Noah rolled behind cover, returning fire with lethal precision. Scar dove to the ground, a bullet grazing his arm. Noah closed the distance, his footsteps silent. Scar scrambled to his feet, his eyes wild as he reached for a knife. He lunged, the blade flashing in the dim light. Noah sidestepped and drove an elbow into Scar's ribs. Scar staggered but swung again, desperate. Noah caught his wrist, twisting sharply. The knife clattered to the ground. The two grappled, breaths ragged. Scar was strong, but Noah's training gave him the edge. With a final, brutal strike, Noah drove Scar to the ground, pinning him beneath his knee. Scar glared up at him, his face twisted with rage. "Go ahead," he spat. "Finish it." Noah stared down, his pistol aimed at Scar's chest. For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of distant fires. Then, slowly, Noah lowered his weapon. "You're not worth it," he said coldly. He stepped back as Scar struggled to his knees. The surviving vultures watched from a distance, weapons lowered, their spirits broken. Noah's voice cut through the silence. "Take him," he ordered, gesturing to Scar, "and tell the rest of your crew, come for me again, and I won't show mercy." The vultures hesitated, but one by one, they moved to help Scar. Their convoy limped away into the night, engines sputtering. As the dust settled, Noah stood alone. The rocky outcrop was littered with wreckage, flames flickering across the terrain. He holstered his pistol, his expression unreadable. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of closure. The vultures had come for him, and he'd sent them back broken. But as he gazed out over the desert, he knew it wasn't over. There would always be others. Always another fight. With a deep breath, Noah climbed into his truck. The engine roared to life, and he drove off into the vast, quiet expanse of the desert. The night was still again.